So the Nightmare on Elm Street remake came out in 2010, and yeah, that pretty much sums it up. We'll see you next time on The Haunted Beard. Welcome back to The Haunted Beard, everybody. My name is Jake. Thank you so much for watching. Well, we have reached the end. The final installment in the Nightmare on Elm Street series. Today, I'm going to be talking about, of course, the remake from 2010, A Nightmare on Elm Street. Let's talk about it. So as far as a plot synopsis goes, there's not really any reason to get into any specifics because if you've seen the original, you know the story. This one tells more or less the exact same story, maybe repackaged just a little bit, but more or less tells the same exact story as the original. So let's just jump right into the review. And I will give a little bit of credit where I feel like a little bit of credit is due. The opening sequence here is, it's not bad. It's pretty good, actually. I think it's a pretty decent opening sequence. You've got just kind of some nice visuals. I like some of the lighting and just kind of has a bit of like a neonish type glow. It reminded me a little bit of some of the old film noir movies from the 40s and 50s, just kind of some of the lighting, the shadows, the contrast, and things like that. And so there's kind of a nice visual presentation specifically to that opening scene. And the kill's not too bad either. I'll also give a little bit of credit as well to Jackie Earle Haley. I think, for the most part, he does a pretty good job as Freddy. Obviously not in the same realm as Robert Englund, but in a movie that is, for the most part, not very great. His performance sticks out as one of the few bright spots in this movie, so I'll give him some props there. I think overall he does a pretty good job with the character of Freddy Krueger.
Did you know that after the heart stops beating, the brain keeps functioning for well over 7 minutes? We got 6 more minutes to play.
But that is where my compliments for this thing end, because the rest of this is... Oh, I'm going to yawn again. The rest of this is not very enjoyable at all. Look, this thing just doesn't even need to exist. There's not really a single good reason for why this thing was even made. I mean, first of all, if you're going to remake something, you have to give us a reason to watch it. There's got to be a reason why it exists. And if you're going to remake a movie, you have to make, I would say, fairly significant changes, or you have to make fairly significant improvements on the original. And if you're going to remake a classic, like, what are you going to do? You're not going to improve upon it. And so then, like, you at least have to make pretty significant changes for us to at least get invested in a different type of story. But they just retell the exact same story. And so I don't really see the point in this thing existing, and there's not really any reason to watch it. And overall, this thing is just very dull and boring and uninspired and unmemorable, and I can feel another yawn coming on. Yeah, there's just nothing here to give us any sort of reason to watch this. It's just very boring. Let's get into some more of the specifics. And look, Rooney Mara, we know that she is a really good actor. She has a handful of really solid performances. This just isn't one of them. And I can't attribute it to her lack of talent because we know she's talented. We know how great she can be. So I have to attribute it to the direction and the screenwriting and just her character. And her character in this of Nancy is just boring and dull. And there's just no energy and life behind so much of her line delivery is just so monotonous and just so it's just boring. I don't know what other word to use. It's just simply boring and uninspired, and there's just nothing to her character. We don't really learn anything about her, and she's just so much worse than the original Nancy. The original Nancy is just a fighter and strong and has that edge to her, and this Nancy is just lifeless. The choice here that they make regarding Freddy, that not only is he a child killer, but a child predator as well, is just not good. It's gross. Because Freddy is ultimately somebody that we kind of love. He's that horror icon that you're a fan of. And you really just lose that here regarding the direction they take with the kids and everything, and it's just icky and gross, and I just don't think it's a good call at all. Also, the CGI here is just terrible. I mean, there is not a better way to date your movie than to use just an overabundance of CGI, and this movie uses it during some of the most impactful and significant moments, and man, it just looks terrible. And I don't know how many times horror fans have to shout from the rooftops, we want practical over CGI. And this is why. I mean, just it's just a very simple comparison. You look at the effects used in the original, which that movie is now almost 40 years old, and now you've got this movie which is 12 years old, and the original is so much better. The effects, they're just more effective. They're just more believable. They're just more real. And the CG here is just terrible. This movie is 12 years old compared to something that's 38 years old, and it feels older in terms of the special effects than the original Nightmare on Elm Street. That's how dated it feels with the CGI. It's just terrible. A couple specific instances where Nancy is asleep on the couch and you get the kind of classic recreation of the shot of Freddy coming out of the wall. How great and fantastic is it in the original? But in here, it looks like something out of a terrible video game. It's just awful. It looks so bad. Also, too, a handful of the effects used in the dream sequences are quite clearly CGI, which again just takes away from the atmosphere and just the effectiveness and the overall quality. Again, it just dates the film and just makes it look so artificial. And then lastly, the final shot of the movie where Nancy's mom gets attacked by Freddy through the mirror, and it just looks laughably bad. There's no other way to say it. I mean, it just looks terrible. It takes away any effectiveness and realness and visceral quality to it. It just, simply put, looks bad. Also, too, the kills in this really pale in comparison to the original and are just not nearly as good. Specifically, the kill of Tina in the original and the kill of Chris in the remake. First of all, Chris is seemingly our main character in the first, 35 minutes of this movie, so we hardly see much Nancy at all. It's kind of an odd choice there. Nancy doesn't really take over as the main protagonist of this film until, 35 minutes in. However, the sequence where Chris is killed is just not at all as effective. It's way over edited. It just too many cuts, and it's shaky and just doesn't look good at all. It's lacking just the blood and the gore and the intensity of the original. It just doesn't have that intense visceral quality that the original has, and it's just not nearly as good at all. Also, too, the kill of Jesse in this, which is the comparison there is the kill of Rod in the original film. This one's just not as good either. In the original, you get just kind of some nice build-up and suspense, and there's just that really cool effect of the bedsheet going to wrap around his neck, and he ultimately gets hung up in his cell. And here they treat his kill as just like a jump scare. He's in the dream world with Freddy, and Freddy kind of disappears for a second, and then just in one quick edit, bam, his hand just sticks through his chest, and then he gets killed. It really just kind of drains it of suspense, and like I said, it just treats it as a jump scare. And speaking of jump scares, this movie has a handful of just really cheap and lame and ineffective jump scares that we have seen time and time again that haven't worked for years and years and still don't work. Yet movies like this are still trying to just simply throw loud bangs and noises at the screen as if that's going to scare us. And it just doesn't. And it's just really bad. Also, the bathtub scene, which in the original, when Freddy's hand comes up out of the bathtub as Nancy's laying there falling asleep, is just such a great scene. And in here, it's so underwhelming and it's so quick, and it hardly lasts at all. It like his hand comes up out of the water for like 2 seconds and then recedes back down, and it's just like there's just nothing to it. Whereas in the original, it actually kind of has this lasting tension, and it's just this kind of prolonged moment. Here it's over so quick. And then of course in the original they just do this cool effect where Nancy gets pulled under the water in the bathtub, and here Nancy falls asleep and is transported to this dream world. And it just, again, the comparison there is just, it's just not as good. It's just not as effective, and it just pales in comparison in every way to the original movie. And look, overall, as I said, this movie is just boring and unmemorable. I feel like I'm going to completely forget about this thing tomorrow, and I don't have any desire to rewatch it at all. And there's nothing here that does anything of significant difference or in any way approves upon the original. A lot of it is just a total and direct ripoff, which again, we're talking about an all-time horror classic. Like, why are we remaking this when you're not doing anything to change it, and especially not anything to improve upon it? So yeah, this is just, it's not a good movie. It's uninspiring and just dull, and again, it's boring. So those are my thoughts on the Nightmare on Elm Street remake from 2010. I think for a grade, I'm probably going to be at like a 3 out of 10 for this thing. So those are my thoughts on that. And that wraps up this series of reviews for the Nightmare on Elm Street. However, I am going to make one final video to completely conclude this thing and cap it off with my official ranking list. Hey, thank you so much for watching. Also, if you like videos like this and you like horror and thriller movie content, click on that red subscribe button for me. I'd greatly appreciate it. That is all I do on my channel, The Haunted Beard. Finally, hit me up down in the comments. I'd be interested in knowing your thoughts on this movie. Is there anybody out there who actually likes it and is a fan of it? I'd be curious to know. So let me know down in the comments. And that is all I got for you. Like I said, be on the lookout. Up next will be my official ranking video for Nightmare on Elm Street series, and we will see you then on The Haunted Beard.